At this point, we have a Liberal minority government with Mark Carney as Prime Minister, just a few seats short of that 172 seat needed to form the majority. Let's go to Perrin Beatty on this, who served 17 years as the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for your time today.
Glad to be with you.
When you see a minority government by higher numbers than a minority, how much of a mandate would you say the Liberals have?
I would have liked to have seen whoever was going to win. I would have liked to have seen a full majority with a very solid mandate to be able to negotiate with Donald Trump. But this is about as close as you get without actually having a majority. This is a very stable minority.
Is it a compromising position because they will need support of other parties for different initiatives?
I think it's very, very stable. I once asked Stephen Harper, how do you negotiate and negotiate with the opposition parties in a minority? His response to me was interesting. He said, you don't negotiate with the opposition, you negotiate with the Canadian people. And what Mark Carney will have to do is to set an agenda that is attractive to Canadians and to then go out potentially on an issue-by-issue basis to the House of Commons to say, we want your support on this. Canadians believe the election is over. They want to see everybody coming together, and they want to see our politicians setting aside their partisanship and focusing on their citizenship. And I think anybody who looked at forcing an early election, for example, would pay a very high price. That gives a good deal of stability.
The NDP, as you know, got hard hit, pretty much demolished in some ways. The leader's going to step down. What role do you see the NDP playing moving forward?
Well, a very different role from last time, where to a very great extent, they were dictating the agenda to Justin Trudeau. I think you're going to find a situation today where they're not in the driver's seat in the same way. And as a consequence, Mr. Carney has the ability to bring the government more back into the center. And that's something certainly the business community and that Canadians as a whole would like to see.
We've heard and have been hearing from leaders in the business community saying they're concerned about tapping into energy resources because Mark Carney is known as a green leader. He has mentioned he's open to conventional energy projects. Do you see forward movement in those files?
I do. I was encouraged last night when Mark Carney talked about humility and talked about his responsibility to represent everybody, including those people who didn't vote for him. He abandoned the carbon tax very early, even before becoming leader, and he's demonstrated a pragmatism. Now, we'll see. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. But if he treats people of all political parties and all regions with generosity, I think we can make some very substantial progress. But the onus is very much on him at this point to demonstrate that he's reaching out to bring people in.
Do you feel that the carbon tax that still exists for businesses is necessary? Is it a hindrance to further investment and growth in Canada?
Well, I think there are a number of things that are inhibitors of growth and investment in Canada. This is one element, but there are others as well. And I think one of the things that's incumbent on Mr. Carney to do is to focus again on the fundamentals and to say, what are the impediments that are in the way to getting investment in the country? How can we act quickly to move them aside? Everything from regulatory reform to actually demonstrating you can actually build something in this country again, to eliminating interprovincial barriers to trade. There are a lot of things that could be done and done quickly if he has the vision and the determination to do it.
Is the job one to get ahead of the trade war some way, have a conversation with Donald Trump? And what do you expect on that front?
It is. I think there are really two priorities the government has to focus on. The first is to deal with Mr. Trump. That's clearly the primary focus that Canadians had in this election campaign. But the second is to get back to basics, to start focusing on the fundamentals, to spend less time on identity politics and on debating plastic straws and more time on what's our productivity like in Canada? How do we attract investment to the country? How do we ensure growth that matches what's taking place in the global economy? And if we can do that, then I think we can make some very serious progress.
Okay, so given that we have a former Bank of Canada governor who does think with a mind to the money, what policies do you expect from him? What sort of investment do you expect from him that will change the business climate in Canada?
Well, I think the first thing is there's a commitment that the premiers and Mr. Carney have made to take down internal barriers to trade in Canada by Canada Day. We need to deliver on that and get that going. We need to see regulatory reform. That costs the government nothing, but it could generate major revenues both for government and for the economy as a whole. These are key areas. We need to focus on building things again. He talked about increasing the housing stock in Canada and using Canadian lumber to do that. That would be a very good thing. We need to look at putting a utilities corridor across the country, which will make it much easier to bring projects on stream and to really build that east-west connection that we need to have. All of these things, I believe, he could find support in the House of Commons to do if he's prepared to do it.
As you know, there has been resistance, right, either provincially or locally to certain projects that, as you mentioned, a corridor would require everyone to be on board, or a lot of provinces to be on board. Do you think that some of the premiers have now softened their stance enough to allow some of these projects to happen, given the current climate?
I hope so. We don't know, but I think there's a very clear sense that Canadians have that it's time to put Canada first, and it's time to focus on what we can do to give Canada the resilience that we need to withstand shocks wherever they come from. Could be from Russia, China, pandemic, the United States, but we have to concentrate on the fundamentals. And the message certainly that I heard from ordinary Canadians was, let's get back to basics.
All right, we do have to leave it there. Perrin Beatty is a former Conservative cabinet minister and also served 17 years as the president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Sir, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.